The Last Ride of Cassidy Blake. The sharp scent of cheap whiskey and stale tobacco hung heavy in the dusty air of the Copperhead Saloon, curling like ghostly fingers around oil lamps and whiskey bottles. Every conversation fell quiet, every gaze fixed on the lone figure pushing through the saloon doors. Her boots echoed hollow against the warped floorboards, a slow, steady rhythm that cut through the smoke and tension. Her name was Cassidy Blake, but few ever got the chance to say it twice. She didn't wear the look of trouble. Plain cotton dress, dust-caked boots, a leather belt scarred from years of hard riding. There was no show, no swagger, just a presence, an air, one that spoke louder than any reputation. She wasn't a woman who wandered. She was a woman who hunted. And the men inside Copperhead were about to learn that hard truth. In the far corner, reclined like a king on his crooked throne, sat Barrett Kane. He was the head of the Red Rock Gang, the most brutal cattle rustlers and bank robbers this side of the Missouri. His thick fingers swirled the amber liquid in his glass as he appraised Cassidy with a lazy smirk, sharp blue eyes gleaming under the shadow of his battered hat. Well, Kane drawled, his voice rough like gravel dragged behind a horse. Looks like someone strayed a little far from the prayer circle. The men around him chuckled low and mean, knives of sound that sliced through the quiet. Cassidy didn't blink. Her ice-gray eyes swept the room with the cold calculation of a hunter sizing up its prey. 12 men, all armed. Not a single one had the stance of a gunfighter. Just thugs. Wolves fat on easy kills, dulled by reputation and numbers. That made them dangerous, but also made them sloppy. She stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath her worn boots. Slowly, deliberately. The noise was soft, but in the hush of the saloon, it sounded like thunder. Kane tilted his head as he set his glass on the table. His grin widened. "I know who you are," he said, voice oily with amusement. "They call you the Widowmaker. Cassidy Blake. Word is you draw faster than your own shadow." He leaned back, exposing the handle of his revolver nestled in its holster. His fingers tapped idly against his belt. "But me? I think that's just campfire talk." The laughter from his gang swelled, then abruptly faded as Kane glanced down. His hand, the one resting on the grip of his gun, was shaking. Cassidy saw it. They both did. "So why?" she asked, her voice calm as the wind sweeping the prairie. "Is your hand trembling, Barrett?" The smirk twitched at the edges of Kane's mouth. A tick pulled at the corner of his jaw. One of his men, a wiry rat of a man named Jedediah Slade, made a move for his pistol. He never got close. Cassidy moved in a blur. A single shot cracked through the air, shattering the silence and the oil lamp above their heads. The saloon plunged into darkness. Chairs scraped violently against the floor. Men cursed. Bottles shattered. For a moment, it was chaos. Then, just as sudden, light bloomed again as lanterns flickered back to life. Cassidy stood behind the bar now, Colt leveled at Kane's temple. Her stance never wavered. Her finger rested gently on the trigger. She was still, controlled, but there was no mistaking it. She was ready to kill. "Tell me, Barrett," she murmured, her voice cutting through the hush like a knife. "Still think I'm just a ghost story?" Kane's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Sweat slicked his forehead, catching the dim light. His breathing was shallow, but his heart was pounding. Cassidy could see it in his eyes, in the pulse throbbing in his neck. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the broken clock above the bar seemed to hold its breath. Midnight. Cassidy stood like a statue, her gaze cold and fixed. This wasn't the pose of an outlaw or a bounty hunter chasing a reward. This was the stance of someone who had walked through hell and learned not to flinch at its fires. Kane's voice was ragged when he finally spoke. "Put the gun down, Blake." Her lips curved. Not in amusement. Something colder. "You think knowing my name makes us kin, Kane?" Her thumb pulled back the hammer of her Colt. The metallic click was sharp as a cleaver. "You and your dogs have spent too long terrorizing these parts. Robbing, burning, hanging farmers from their own rafters. You deserve worse." To her left, movement. Levi Boone, Kane's second, reaching for his revolver. Too slow. Cassidy fired. The shot kicked up splinters an inch from his foot. He stumbled back, pale and shaking. "Damn it, Boone," Kane snarled. "No one draws unless I say." Cassidy's eyes didn't leave Kane's. "Unless you say," she repeated. "Cute." Kane's smirk faltered. For the first time in years, he wasn't holding the reins. His fingers flexed near his holster, weighing his odds. He didn't stand a chance. He knew it. Cassidy didn't just draw fast. She was flawless. No hesitation. No wasted motion. If he gambled, he'd die. The saloon doors creaked open. Everyone tensed as a shadow stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, boots heavy with dust. A revolver hung low on his hip. Beckett Rollins, a name that made hard men shudder. A lawman once, before he vanished in a legend. Some said dead. Others said he'd turned outlaw. Now he stood here, very much alive. "You've got a hell of a mess here, Kane," Rollins said, his voice low and rough as old leather. Kane's jaw clenched. Cassidy didn't lower her gun. She knew who Beckett Rollins was. So did everyone in that room. His name was whispered in outlaw circles like a curse. "You gonna kill him?" Beckett asked, his gaze flicking from Kane to Cassidy. Cassidy didn't answer immediately. She had hunted Kane for half a year, following the trail of burnt homes and broken families he left behind. Every town she passed had its own story, its own dead. Killing him would be justice. But something in Rollins' eyes made her pause. Slowly, she exhaled and lowered the gun. Kane let out a shaky breath. But Cassidy's next words froze him. "You'll get your bullet, Barrett. Just not tonight." She turned for the door, her boots tapping quietly against the wooden floor. Beckett watched her leave, then glanced back at Kane. "If I were you, I'd be gone before sunrise." Kane didn't move. He just watched Cassidy disappear into the night, knowing this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Part 2, Ghosts of the Past. The desert stretched endlessly under a bruised purple sky. The moon hung heavy and low, casting pale light on the cracked earth. Cassidy rode in silence, her horse's steady hooves thudding softly beneath her. She should have felt relief, but the knot in her gut told her otherwise. She'd spared Kane. That wasn't like her, and it gnawed at her. Beckett Rollins. His name stuck in her head like a splinter. He wasn't supposed to be alive. His gaze had been steady in that saloon, like a man who'd seen death up close and made peace with it. He hadn't stood in her way. Not exactly, but he'd changed something. Up ahead, the jagged outline of an old mission loomed against the horizon. It had long since fallen to ruin. The bell stolen, its wooden beams bleached pale by years of sun. It was as close to a home as Cassidy had these days. She dismounted, leading her horse to the half-collapsed stable beside the chapel. Something moved in the shadows. Cassidy drew her revolver. Smooth, silent. "Step out," she said. Beckett Rollins did. "Didn't take you for the stalking type," Cassidy said, not lowering her gun. "Only when I'm curious," he replied. "Is that a compliment or a threat?" He smiled faintly. "Depends on you." They stood like that for a long moment. Two ghosts from different wars, measuring one another. "You should have killed Kane," Beckett said finally. "I'll handle him," she answered flatly. "He's got more men than you saw tonight. Loyal ones. Not because they fear him, but because they want to be him." Cassidy shrugged. "Then I'll kill them, too." Beckett sighed. "You ever wonder if you're chasing the wrong fight?" She didn't answer. She wasn't sure how. Beckett leaned against a cracked pillar. "I knew your father." Cassidy froze. Callum Blake, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. A shadow she had spent her life outrunning. "Callum wasn't the man they said he was," Beckett said. "And neither are you." Cassidy's grip tightened on her gun. "We'll talk later," Beckett continued. "But you've been riding in the wrong direction for a long time." Part 3, Reckoning at Black Hollow. The sun was rising over Black Hollow Ranch. The once thriving homestead was now a husk, home to thieves and killers. Cassidy sat her horse, Beckett at her side, and a wiry kid named Jace Holden riding close behind. Jace had news. Kane wasn't running. He was waiting, and he wasn't alone. Jericho Vane was coming. Cassidy's blood turned to ice. Jericho wasn't just an outlaw. He was a butcher, a firebrand, A man who burned towns for fun. And he was coming for her. By dawn, they rode hard through the night. No time for fear or second-guessing. Jace was young but sharp. Beckett was steady. But Cassidy knew this fight might be her last. They reached Black Hollow just as the first light split the sky. They didn't sneak in. They rode straight through the front gate. Bullets flew. Men shouted. Chaos erupted. Cassidy was fast. Beckett faster than anyone expected. Jace held his own, desperate but brave. Kane was waiting on the porch. His shotgun thundered through the dust. "You should have killed me, Blake," he roared. She didn't answer. She just fired. Part 4. The Devil Arrives. As Kane bled out in the dust, the ground began to shake. Jericho Vane and his riders were here. Cassidy reloaded, sweat and blood streaking her face. "You ready?" Beckett asked. She nodded. Not for dying. They stood together as Jericho dismounted, his silver-handled pistols gleaming in the dawn light. "You ready to die, Blake?" Jericho asked. "Not today." Cassidy's gun cleared leather first. The fight was brutal. Fast. Bloody. Beckett fell. Wounded but still fighting. Jace held his ground, young hand steady on his rifle. Cassidy found Jericho in the smoke. They fought like wolves, brutal and close. And in the end, she won. She didn't kill him. She let him live. To rot. Part 5. Freedom. As the sun climbed high, Cassidy stood at the gates of Black Hollow. It was over. Kane was dead. Jericho captured. Beckett alive. Jace free. And for the first time in years, Cassidy Blake wasn't running. She was home, or something close to it.